What a night outside. The night sky was clear and the stars and moon shined down on the land. What I can see from my window was just that stars, moon, and lots of snow. What caught my attention was a shadow staring at me behind a distant tree. It looked at me like it was wanting me. The eyes were the only thing I can see clearly. The way it was moving, it looked like it was hungry, or even evil, but for what reason was it doing outside my window and staring at me? In fear of shutting my eyes, I tried not to blink, afraid it will disappear, or even worse, get close. But the urge of closing my eyes got very difficult, and I rubbed my eyes only to find out in horror that the shadow was no longer there. It was like it was never there. I looked around to make sure it wasn't close, or worse, trying to get it. I decided to lock the window and close the curtains. I ran back in bed and tried not to look at the window in fear that the shadow was right there, or even worse, in the room. I need to go to bed since it's past my bedtime and my birthday was the next day. Afraid to sleep and afraid to close my eyes that the shadow will come for me. I got up quickly to lock the window and ran back in bed. I feared the worst as my body got tired and my eyes were heavy. I stared to slims down the bed to sleep, but I asked myself, if I lay down, will the shadow come for me as I sleep? Or will the shadow wait till I'm weak and can't defend myself? In true horror, I tried to fight the sleep and I watched my candle flickered next to me in my nightstand. I slowly started to lay down since my body gave out on me. I slowly drifted off to sleep when suddenly I heard a creak from the window. In true terror, I got up and looked at the window only to discover the curtains were drawn back a bit. Then I looked at my room only to see nothing. I noticed my room felt like an icebox. I asked myself, who turned the air off? At first nothing seems to be out of place from what I can see until my eyes saw that the candle went out. In fear, I rose out of bed too quickly that I didn't realize that the floor was ice, and I slipped and fell. When I woke up, I was in a haze to what happened, only to find out that my floor turned into ice and blood. A thin layer of ice covered my room. I tried to get up, but the floor was slippery and covered in blood. My blood. I stopped and sat on my knees to touch my face only to discover that my nose was bleeding as I fell. I tried to turn around and grab my bed to get up. Until I stopped and noticed I saw eyes watching me from under the bed. In true terror, I tried to make a run for it, only to discover that the shadow grabbed my legs. I turned around anyways to get up, but it was too late. The shadow was pulling me in, and by some force the shadow started to drag me under the bed. I struggled to get up, but the force was strong. I tried to scream, but it sounded like no one heard me. I sounded like I had no voice. I tried to call out for help or get my parents' attention to notice that I'm in danger. I was dragged down more and more. I fought, trying to escape, but the force was too strong. I grabbed my bed frame and chanced to fight off this shadow only to be taken down by some force. In the moment, it felt like time was slowing down. I saw my doom and I looked up and saw my bedroom. At my last look of my bedroom, I saw footsteps running in only to discover I'm gone without a trace. My last-ditch effort was to scream, "I love you." Last thing I remember that my father's hands reaching under the bed and trying to grab my hand only to feel the tips of his hand. I was taken away. When I opened my eyes again, everything was so white. And my ears were ringing and voices were in my head, all too familiar, but hard to remember what happened. When everything settled and my vision came back, I noticed that I'm in my room and staring out the window. A night where the sky was clear that day and the stars and moon shined bright. Looking down at all the snow that covered all trees and houses. Only something catches my eye. I saw what looks like a shadow looking back at me. In fear that seems all too real yet so distant. Then all at once, my memory came to me, the shadow, the ice, my father's effort into saving me. In fear of what might come, I tried to open my door, only to discover that the shadow was there in front of me. In shock and in terror, you know what will happen if you stay. So for your effort to save not only you but your parents' grief was to leave. Opening the window, the blast of the winter night air hits you. Turning around and looking at the bedroom, you say to yourself, I hope one day I can return to you, father and mother. Always remember that I had to run to save myself and death that may come. As I stepped outside, the snow was ankle deep, and you went on without looking back, knowing that your life is on thin ice.